really our goal is to train adult caregivers to be the best they can be for the kids that they care for, whether it's their parents, foster parents. Early such an impact that first 35 years patients operate in different levels. You can still overcome your challenges, but you can catch it with better seeing. And you can just, your brain is developing this. It's not like your heart that's already intact. There's great things that happen to you those first 3 years. Set up everything. So, you have a chance to improve and get better, but later it's hard.
How's it going? Hey, George. How you doing? Good. Yeah, hello, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Good. Wonderful. Wonderful. Glad to hear that. Folks, welcome to the Thursday afternoon meeting once again of the Rotary Club of Tyler. That's right. Is everybody happy?
Yes.
That's good. All right, right, folks, let's make sure that we've all got our cell phones on quiet. Our ringtone is a air raid siren, scared the daylights out of a couple of ladies at Walmart the other day. But then again, it was a little bit funny. Vicki, I want to thank our pianist, Vicki Cup. Thank you. Back from COVID, huh? Oh, he's got it now? Oh, okay. Glad to hear that. Glad to hear that. Okay, well, let's go ahead and bring up Rochelle Ewert, who just put a great big mouthful of food in her mouth. She's going to lead us in the national anthem and Pledge of Allegiance. Don't do so with your mouth full.
You're good.
You'll all stand to face the flag.
Don't choke.
I know, right? Let me get this. All right, here we go. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light, once proudly began, after twilight's last gleaming, whose stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red there, the hearts bursting in air, gave proof beyond night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you, Rochelle. Now let's bring up Dr. D.M. Edwards for our invocation and introductions.
Thank you, President Bill. As we prepare to pray today, remember that just 2 days ago on June the 14th was Flag Day, when I was driving through the neighborhoods on the way over to Holly Tree today. It was wonderful to see the flags flying in the various neighborhoods around our fair town. Let's bow together in a word of prayer. Father, we're grateful for each person, each family represented here at the meeting today. We pause, Lord, as we think of our country and patriotism. We're grateful for the liberties that we enjoy, and we pause to remember people around the world that do not have those freedoms. We lift up to you the people in Ukraine that are fighting to preserve their freedom against the adversary that has attacked them. And ask, Lord, that your blessings would rest upon the Ukrainians. We thank you for this food and for every blessing that we enjoy, for the activities of our own Tyler Rotary Foundation and the humanitarian work of Rotary around the world. We ask all these things, Lord, in your powerful and perfect name. Amen.
Amen.
If you'll be seated, we'll have introductions at this time. Let me ask, are there any visiting Rotarians here from other clubs that we might recognize at this time? If not, let's move to a guest of Rotarians. Do we have any guests on this side of the room over here? Yeah, if you brought a guest with you, would you stand and introduce them? Looks like home folks. How about visitors over on this side of the room? All right.
I'm my dear friend Kelvin Woodson with China Indian Group with me today.
Wonderful. Welcome. We're glad you're here today. Come back and visit with us often. President Bill.
Okay, thank you, DM. And why did I put my glasses up? I just got to get them out again. I don't know why I do that. I want to thank our greeters today, John Miguez and Bill Broom. Gentlemen, stand up and be recognized, please. Thank you very much. now, my friends, it's time once again. Please welcome to the microphone, the owner of KTBB Radio, Mr. Paul Glasser. This week in history.
Thank you. Today, the 16th of June, 1903, Henry Ford and 11 other men met at an office in Detroit to sign and file the necessary paperwork to form the Ford Motor Company. Ford is the only American automaker still doing business under its original corporate charter. Members of the Ford family still control 40% of the company's voting stock. On the 17th of June, 1994, we all watched on TV as O.J. Simpson, driving a white Ford Bronco, led LA police on an hour-long, 35-mile-per-hour chase along Los Angeles' freeways. The chase ended when Simpson pulled into the driveway of his Brentwood home and was arrested on 2 counts of murder, charges of which he was eventually acquitted. On the 18th of June, 1815, the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte led and lost his last military engagement 12 miles south of Brussels near a small village called Waterloo. England's Duke of Wellington, with the help of the Prussian army, forced a disorganized retreat of Napoleon's forces. Napoleon returned to Paris, abdicated his throne on June 22nd, and surrendered to British forces. He died in exile 6 years later on the remote South Atlantic island of St. Helena. On the 19th of June, 1953, first Julius and then Ethel Rosenberg were executed in New York's Sing Sing prison in the electric for their role in passing of the secrets of the atomic bomb to the Soviet Union. On the 20th of June, 1963, kind of tied to that, as a result of the Cuban Missile Crisis of the previous October, the United States and the Soviet Union signed an agreement establishing a 24-hour-a-day communications link between the two governments. Quickly dubbed the hotline, the link was actually a telex teletype terminal. It was not a phone. However, the Bell system introduced a red phone as a choice for consumers the following year. On the 21st of June, 1788, this is a big day, New Hampshire became the 9th and deciding state to ratify the new United States Constitution that had been agreed to by delegates to the convention in Philadelphia in September of the previous year. It was subsequently agreed that operation of the United States under the new Constitution would commence on March 4th, 1789. And finally, on the 22nd of June, 1945, having commenced on April 1st, the last pockets of resistance were overcome by U.S. troops in the Battle of Okinawa. In the nearly 3 months of fighting, the U.S. lost 12,000 men. The Japanese lost 10 times that number. 36 U.S. naval vessels lost were almost all victims of kamikaze attacks. Okinawa was to have been the staging point for an eventual amphibious invasion of the Japanese homeland. Birthdays in the coming week, starting tomorrow. Barry Manilow, the singer, turns 79. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich shares that birthday with Barry Manilow. He too turns 79 tomorrow. Sir Paul McCartney on Saturday will turn 80.
Ooh.
Yeah, that one bites, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This one's a little easier to take. Nicole Kidman turns 55 on Monday, but then we go right back to it on Monday as well. Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys turns 80.
Ooh.
Yeah, and that's this week in history.
All of a sudden, my rheumatism is acting up. Okay, I'm going to call some names out here. And if your name is called, I want you to stand up. Okay? Holly Lewis. Holly's not in the room right now. Oh, he is? Okay, Holly, stand up. Jennifer Dobbins. Is Jennifer here?
Vacation.
Vacation. All right. JB3.
Woo.
Denise Miller. Y'all don't even know what you're clapping for yet. What's up with this? Well, Denise is not here. How about who? You.
Me?
Yes. Do I have to give you an invitation or something? Okay. Ashley Wilson, she's not here. Colby McElwee. Austin Luce, Austin's not here. What about Bill Crew? Stand up, Bill, stand up. Now, the reason I'm asking these folks to stand is because this will be your board of directors when Steve Williams takes over as president of the club. I want to be the first one to thank you guys for your service and willingness to help. Thank you all very much.
You, appreciate you.
Okay, I'm glad somebody appreciates me. Okay. Program for next week will be the High Sheriff himself, Larry Smith. And now let's bring up the world's greatest president-elect. Here he comes, folks. Like a steel trap, ready to go off. Please welcome Allison Cameron to introduce today's speaker.
Nobody can live up to that. Constable Joplin is the Smith County Precinct 4 Constable. He's a graduate of Chapel Hill High School and a Tyler native who grew up in the cattle and hay production way of life. Constable Joplin pursued a career in law enforcement for 2 years after he graduated from high school. Having served in many capacities throughout his law enforcement career, Constable Joplin started as a jailer for Smith County Sheriff's Office in 2011, and it seemed like we had a Texas Ranger started off the same way recently. Constable Joplin worked in the patrol division and served as a K-9 unit with the Brownsboro Police, as well as school resource officer for Marshall ISD, and as the chief of police for Athens Water Authority. In January of 2017, excuse me, Constable Joplin was sworn into office as the elected Smith County Precinct 4 Constable and is currently serving his second term in winning the 2020 general election as the largest precinct in Smith County and providing courthouse security. Precinct 4 Justice Court. Precinct 4, over which he is, encompasses 322 square miles of Smith County, and Precinct 4 Constable's Office is the only law enforcement agency within their jurisdiction. Constable Joplin is a graduate of the Bill Blackwood Institute for Texas Constable Leadership College at Sam Houston State University, and he continues to further his education at that institution. Constable Joplin holds an advanced peace officer license through the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. He also holds certifications as a field training officer in advanced civil process, courtroom security, defense tactics, baton, nunchaku instructor, and investigations. He's also a cattle rancher, a licensed professional auctioneer specializing in livestock, agriculture, equipment sales, along with some charity benefit fundraising. I welcome to the podium Constable Joplin.
So can everybody hear me? I like to walk around. I'm not a big microphone person. I like to move. I thank my ADHD for that. So again, my name's Josh Joplin. I'm the constable for Smith County Precinct 4. For everybody that doesn't know where Precinct 4 is, I have the entire northeast quadrant of the county. I go everywhere from Red Springs all the way to Gladewater and all the way to Big Sandy and Winona. I border 4 counties. In which we have jurisdiction to do civil process in those counties, as well as the area for which I cover in Smith County. To give you a little idea on how big my precinct is, the entire city of Tyler is 54 square miles, and they have a police department that services that with over about 200 officers. I can fit 5 land masses the size of the city of Tyler in my precinct and still have room left over, and I cover that entire area with myself and 6 employees. So it's a big area to cover. The Smith County Sheriff's Office does have deputies that are in that area. They usually assign 1 or 2 to our section. With the Sheriff's Department's help, at any given time, we might have 4 to 5 people day or night covering that entire area and serving a population of about 40,000 people. So people always ask, what is a constable? They always want to know what a constable is. They see the cars driving around, but nobody really knows what they do. So the constable is the oldest form of law enforcement in the world. The position was originated in the Eastern Roman Empire. The primary duties was the commander of the king's armies and upheld the crown rule of orders. Later on in the colonial era, constables kind of started taking on more of a county official's duties, both in civil and criminal matters. The sheriff was appointed 2 years later in 1634, and the sheriff's main responsibility then was to collect taxes and man the jail. What that means is the constable was the very first law enforcement agency to ever exist in the world, and it was the first law enforcement agency to exist in the United States as it was formed. Continued, the Texas Constable Thomas Alley was the first constable to be appointed in Stephen F. Austin's original colony. Later, another constable was sworn in, making the two constables the first originating law enforcement in the state of Texas. 3 months later, with all the issues across Texas, the original two constables stayed to protect the local colonies, and 10 others were appointed and sent out to protect the range and guard the frontier. These men were later formed as the Texas Rangers. So that's right, the constables were number one. So, combined became an active group of roughly strategically used to go in and move out the nation surrounding San Jacinto, and this allowed Sam Houston's army the opportunity to quietly attack Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto. The constable was later written into the constitutional law and was the only law enforcement in the original Texas Constitution. At that time, Sam Houston formally separated the two groups, and the constable would be elected by the people in each local area known as precincts. The Texas Rangers became an officer of the new republic, and both groups would be commissioned and report directly to the governor, and that still holds true today. So my commission, although my law enforcement commission is held by the Smith County Precinct 4 Constable's Office, the only person that I directly report to, that I have to take any orders from, is the governor of the state of Texas. The only people that I answer to are the people who elect me, and I answer to them every 4 years. Over the years, some familiar figures have spent part of their lives and careers as a constable or a deputy constable. I'm sure some of these names y'all have heard: Virgil and Wyatt Earp, John Selman, Wild Bill Hickok, and Texas Rangers such as Clint Peoples, for whom the Montgomery County Regional Training Academy was named after. All these people that I just named were constables at some point in their career. During the Civil War, most constables joined their brothers, the Texas Rangers, and fought for the Confederate Army. From 1869 to 1872, there were no elected constables in Texas, and only a couple appointed by a few local justices of the peace were still in existence. The Constitution of 1876 mandated once again that constables be elected at the local precinct level. Currently, only 23 states in the U.S. have constables, and each state varies from elected to appointed, city or county, parish, and to legal jurisdiction and authority. Today, these constables are elected and serve 4-year terms, which run on the same cycle as the President of the United States, and they are the officers of the Justice of the Peace Court. Each constable has the authority to appoint deputies to work under their expertise, and they are given the same authority as the constable. And a constable is considered to be the people's police because of their constitutional origin and local elected representation of the people. Now, a constable is given constitutional authority to enforce both civil and criminal law. So what I mean by that is, if anybody in here owns their own house, or they own a rent house, or whatever the case may be, the Tyler Police Department, for example, is municipal law enforcement. They cannot enforce civil law in the state of Texas. They can't do an eviction. They can't make anybody leave. They can't do any of that. The constable is the only form of law enforcement that can do evictions. They're the only form of law enforcement that can carry out certain civil proceedings that are issued by a justice of the peace. The sheriff has the ability to do some civil matters, depending on what they are. They do a lot of property sales if you don't pay your taxes on your property or whatever the case may be. But for the most part, when we're dealing with a landlord or a tenant or things of that nature, that's pretty much part of what we do. It's part of civil law enforcement. So if anybody knows who Buford Pusser is, walking tall, probably one of the most famous sheriffs to ever wear a badge, fighting crime and corruption in Tennessee. Buford Pusser was actually a constable prior to being the sheriff. So I use this for an example. A lot of people who might have had their fame or name mentioned as a sheriff or a ranger, a lot of them started out as a constable. Again, Walking Tall, if anybody's ever seen the movie, I know that The Rock tried to redo the movie. I'm sorry, but it wasn't near as good as the old one in my opinion, but that's just my opinion. So they disrespected my authority. So I put this in there because a lot of times when we go on calls, people say, well, you're just a constable. You don't have the authority to tell me what to do. I don't have to listen to you. What's a constable? You and a mall cop have the same authority. Well, probably not. So what authority does a constable have? The office of a constable is mandated by Article 5, Section 18 of the Texas Constitution, which states that in each justice of the peace precinct, a constable shall be elected. A constable is a licensed commissioned peace officer elected by county constituents every 4 years for a particular area, which we call a precinct of that county. And each constable's office is separate and unique in a law enforcement agency and independent of all other county departments, elected officials, and law enforcement agencies. So what I meant by that, a lot of people think that a constable is under the sheriff, or the sheriff is their boss, or the police chief is their boss. That's when we go back to what I said by we answer to the governor and the governor only. Once we are elected and we be in that office, the only people we listen to is the governor and the people who elect us every 4 years. In accordance with the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, constables have the same duties and powers as other peace officers such as municipal police, sheriffs, all criminal laws, traffic laws, and conduct criminal investigations. In addition, by statute, constables must serve all warrants per set. This is what that says. I think I misspelled it. And civil process lawfully directed to them. Therefore, the constable is the chief process server for the justice court, and constables are required by law to be present or ensure one of their deputy constables are present during hearings held by the justice of the peace. Anytime my judge takes the bench, I am required by law to have someone in there as his bailiff, whether it's me or one of my deputies. If he puts on that robe, whether he's getting out of the shower or going to court, I have got to have somebody there in his court to represent him for his protection and safety. To meet the challenges and demands of taking on the full responsibilities of being a peace officer, as well as the added liabilities of processing civil cases, all Texas constables and deputy constables must be licensed by the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. We must attend and complete the police academy and fulfill all ongoing continuing education requirements for peace officers, including civil process. So for a police officer at Tyler or a Smith County Sheriff's deputy, they have to take 40 hours of continuing education every 2 years to maintain their peace officer license. We have to do that, plus we have to maintain this because we deal with civil law as well. So the duties of a constable, we just went over that: serve warrants, civil papers such as subpoenas and temporary restraining orders, serve as a bailiff for the justice of the peace. I use this as an example because people really don't understand how county government works until you put it in this perspective. So city government works like a pyramid. You have a city manager or a police chief, somebody that runs the show, and they're at the very top, and then under them it trickles down. In county government, we use the Parthenon. The reason we use that is because each individual pillar, if you will, is an independent elected official. I can't tell Judge Nathaniel Moran how to be the county judge. I can't tell a commissioner how to be the commissioner. I can't tell the sheriff how to be the sheriff. They can't tell me how to be the constable. So we have all of these elected offices that have to come together and work together to create one form of government for the people. And sometimes getting along can be hard, but we all try as best we can because at the end of the day, it's all about the people. It's all about taking care of the citizens. So, law enforcement and life under the big top. I use a circus tent for this, and people usually think it's funny, but I'll explain why I use this. In law enforcement, the weird part is you never know what you're going to get on a daily basis. So as a constable, I just told you my job is to serve civil process and bailiff the court. I am the only law enforcement agency that is housed in my precinct. So a lot of people look at us as their law enforcement. We're their local agency. So my narcotics, we deal with disturbances, we deal with assault and family violence, we deal with issues at our school districts with kids. we deal with just about every law enforcement issue that you can think of. So I circus, because when you go to a circus, you really never know what you're going to get. So Constable Dale Getty was the constable in my precinct. He was shot and killed in the line of duty where I am at today. For those of you that don't know the story, Smith County Precinct 4 Constable Dale Getty, Deputy Daniel Leon of the Smith County Sheriff's Office, and another unidentified officer arrived at a disturbance in northeastern Smith County. When they approached, they came under fire. Getty and Leon were both hit. They were both immediately taken to ETMC, where Constable Dale Getty was pronounced dead. Armored vehicles, a SWAT team, and officers in bulletproof vests arrived on scene shortly after the shooting. They were ready to do whatever it took to catch the shooter, and it was a tense 2 hours for everyone, and negotiations were ongoing when the gunman came out of the house armed with a high-powered assault rifle. When officers saw the gun, came firing the shot that would end the standoff and killing the man who had been keeping them at bay. So the story on this is Dale, I was a kid, was on his way to the peace officer luncheon, and he sent Deputy Leon to a disturbance, and he heard Deputy Leon calling for backup. When Dale turned around to leave the peace officer luncheon to go back and back the deputy up, when he got out of the vehicle, Dale was getting his rifle out of the back of the car, and the man yelled, "You better tell the guy in the white shirt to get down." And he fired a shot, and it ended up hitting Dale in the head, and it ended up killing him instantly on scene. So people ask what the difference is between constables, police, and sheriffs. As far as law enforcement is concerned, there is no difference. We all have the same authority. We all put our lives on the line every day. We all answer calls. We go above and beyond the call of duty to try and take care of the citizens as a whole. When we deal with the types of civil process, however, with constables, it becomes a little tricky. Evictions is where we basically go out and we remove someone from household because they're not paying their rent, or the judge grants the property to the landlord because someone's tore up their property and they're not paying their rent. When we do writ of possessions, that's where we have already told someone that they have to leave, they will not leave. We have to get an order, and that is where my staff and I have to go, and we have to remove every single piece of property that that person owns and put it out on the side of the highway. So when it looks like the Clampetts are having a yard sale, you can pretty much guarantee that's what went down. Writ of executions. A lot of people think that this isn't possible, but believe it or not, when you get a writ of execution, that's where I get an order from my judge where someone owes someone money, and I have to come to their house and seize their property and sell it to gain the money that they owe someone. A lot of people don't realize that that's possible to do in the state of Texas. We've held several writ of execution sales where I've had to go out and seize tractors. I've had to seize different things of that nature, motorcycles, cars. There's all kinds of things that we can seize, that we can take and sell to gain money for someone. Yes.
When do you auction or sell that stuff?
So when we have an auction, what we do is we're required by law to post that in the newspaper. We're required by law to make that public. Most of the time when we hold an auction, we do it on the courthouse steps. It is advertised, and we usually do it on a Tuesday. That's normally when we do it. Luckily for me, I don't have to pay for an auctioneer out of my budget to do that because I am an auctioneer. So therefore, the county gets a freebie on me. Child support. Child support is a very, very big issue that we deal with. I have a great working relationship with the Attorney General's office. We do a warrant, except for COVID, because COVID hit. We used to do 2 warrant roundups a year. We would meet downtown at 2 o'clock in the morning. They would give us all the packets on everybody that was way behind on child support. We'd go ahead and fill the bookend sheets out there that morning, and then we'd go out in teams of 5, and we'd just go hit houses and lock them up for no child support. Writ of attachment. The constable's office is also tasked with working with CPS and doing writ of attachments. What a writ of attachment is that's where if a judge decides that a child no longer needs to be with the parent, we're required by law to go out there and take that child from that parent. So that people don't realize with constables is you see them riding around, knows what they do. Being a constable is a very dangerous job. You're kicking people out of their house. You're taking their property to sell it because they owe somebody money, or you're taking their kids away from them. So can you see where that would be a very high tense situation? And people wonder why we argue with folks all the time. So lawsuits and civil liability. As the constable, I have the pleasure of being sued by everybody that doesn't like what my office does under the color of law. So if my judge issues me an order, I have to follow that order. I have to follow that order out. So when I go and I follow that order out, the judge is the one that gets sued because he's got immunity. But I get sued, so I have to deal with that. Then we have to deal with bad press. So if I'm putting somebody out of a house, or let's say that I take a child from somebody and they on TV and say this big bad constable showed up and he took my 4-year-old daughter and I can't believe that he did that. No, he's just so bad. Well, most of the time we got good news around here, so they'll call us and say, hey, what happened? But there are constables I know in Harris County, they get put all over the news for stuff, and they have the legal right to do it, but they get put on the news because the news is looking for something to report. You have an increased chance of confrontation. You have higher chances of an officer-involved shooting. So if you have an officer that goes out to a house and they're putting somebody out of a house, that person's been living there for 10 or 12 years, and now the people that were renting in the house have passed away and their son has inherited that property, and he's decided, my dad was nice to you, you haven't paid rent in 2 years, and you got to go, and they decide they don't want to go. I have had people pull guns on us before. I have had people I had a guy tell me 3 weeks ago the only way he was leaving that house was in a body bag. Those are the type of issues that we deal with. My favorite one is citizens that question or challenge a constable's authority. We will pull people over and they will tell us you do not have the power to stop me because you are a constable. Wrong again. We'll go to houses where we're dealing with a disturbance and somebody will say, well, you can't arrest me because you're just a constable. Wrong again. So, loss of employment due to carrying out the duties of the office. So let's say that 50% of your precinct doesn't pay their rent and you kick them out of the house. And they decide they're going to vote you out because you don't want to let them live rent-free. So now I have to go look for another job because I'm doing the job that I was elected to do. And then again, you fall onto officer safety issues, again, due to increased confrontation and a higher chance of an officer-involved shooting, and also lawsuits and civil liability. This is the part that people don't understand, and I wanted to put this in here so that people could see this from a public perspective. You have two sides of being a constable. And I go to conferences all the time, and I talk to constables who have just themselves in their office. I know constables that have 1,700 deputies in their office, very, very large agencies. Take Harris County, for instance. The sheriff does not do law enforcement in Harris County. He mans the jail. The constables do law enforcement. A sheriff's primary duty in the state of Texas is to maintain the jail. That's their primary duty. So, on the politics side of it.
Well, time out. So there's no Harris County sheriff deputies running around town?
There are a few, but 90% of law enforcement in the unincorporated jurisdictions of Harris County will be answered by a constable.
Really?
They have their own dispatch, their own patrol, their own narcotics division. They have helicopters. They got all that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Dallas County is the same way. Dallas
So the
County,
Harris County guy gets elected, he's basically, his job is to be administrator of the jail. That's
pretty
it.
much, because the Harris County Jail is the largest jail in the United States.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. So-
Very little sheriff's patrol in Dallas County.
Yeah, most of their job is to do like courthouse security. Like for our county, for instance, it's a little bit flipped.
Right.
We have a big sheriff's office and you have small constables' offices, but in reality, the constable's offices answer just as many calls as the sheriff does. We just don't get the funding that some of these bigger counties
Right.
get. So like I use this for Smith County purposes, so if y'all throw stones at me, I'm sorry. But the county commissioners often don't like constables doing law enforcement. They only want a constable to serve papers in bailiff court. So if you live in my precinct and you come to my office and you say, hey, Josh, I got this guy speeding up and down our road, and, the guy's going to end up running over one of my kids, or he's going to hit Fifi when she's out by the mailbox using the bathroom. Do you really think you could send a deputy out there to maybe slow this guy down, maybe go talk to him, whatever? You're a taxpayer. We're driving the same patrol cars the sheriff's office is driving. Lights, sirens, cameras, all that good stuff. But I look at you and tell you, well, my commissioner really doesn't want me doing all that, so you're going to have to call the sheriff. How does that make you feel as a taxpayer to know you're paying for me to have all this police equipment and you're paying for me to have all these deputies, but I'm telling you that I can't do nothing for you? Well, that's going to aggravate you. So that puts me in a position to where, do I make my citizens happy who vote for me, or do I make my commissioner mad who controls my budget? So county commissioners often try to cut the constable's funding and won't provide them with extra staff or equipment, making them a one-man office in most counties. I have a friend of mine, he's the constable in Knox County, which is a huge county. It only has like 3,000 people. He is the only constable for the whole county by himself. So county commissioners often believe the sheriff is the most important law enforcement agency within the county. Some of them do believe that. I know our county, our sheriff's office, he outnumbers me probably 50-1 because he's got like 400 employees. But elected sheriffs often believe that they are the primary law enforcement agency or the chief law enforcement officer of the county. So again, if you don't have a good working relationship with your sheriff, which I don't have that problem, but a lot of sheriffs kind of feel like they're the superior power. So it kind of makes the constable feel like our hands are tied, when in reality, I just told you, the only people we answer to is our citizens and the government. So do we have the power to do law enforcement? Absolutely. Do I have the same authorities and powers as the sheriff? Absolutely. Is there politics involved with that? You can hang your hat on it. So constables are often the last thought and one of the most important, and often they're also. So most people, when we do our budget at the constable's office, it would probably shock you to know that I employ 6 people. I have 6 patrol cars, a fuel budget. I pay for benefits. I have to pay for all the equipment my officers need, and I do that for under $500,000 a year.
Ooh, good job.
That's not much of a budget,
No.
but we cover it. We do the best we can. So the public service side of things, keeping your promises to your constituents in your precinct is your first priority. If you can't keep a promise or you can't deliver on your guarantees when you run for office, those people aren't going to elect you again. There's no trust. Maintaining close working relationships with your landlords and business owners. If you have someone who owns 65% of the rental property in your precinct, you're going to work with that person on a daily basis because people aren't going to pay their rent. And they rely on you to put them out of that house so they can continue maintaining their business. Being visible and providing a service to the areas in the community that don't have a law enforcement presence. So every precinct in Smith County except mine has municipal law enforcement. White House, Troop, Overton, Art, Lindale, they have a police department. So they don't have to worry about covering those areas because their police department takes care of that. I have none of that. So my people expect me to cover it all. So always working with other law enforcement agencies and try to provide them with services in any way possible. We help the sheriff's office do a lot of stuff. Their narcotics department will call my guys. Most of my guys have a narcotics background because I have a narcotics background. So if the sheriff's office is tied up or they're busy working something else or they get a tip on a dope house, a lot of times they'll give it to us because they don't have the time to work it. They've got too much going on. Working with local school districts and developing a plan to assist in emergency situations that may arise. I have answered, I had to show up to Chapel Hill ISD not too long ago on a bomb threat that they had. Ended up working with their chief of police. He was so overwhelmed with trying to get everybody evacuated that my team went ahead and took command of the scene as far as doing the searching for any explosives, locking down the school, doing all that. You have to be able to work hand in hand and be able to split it down the middle because one person can't make all the decisions in a situation like that. So I always ask for any questions. I try to cover everything that I can in such a short amount of time, but I will take some questions. Go ahead.
Obvious question, how can you get more money in your budget? You way understand.
So it's funny you mentioned that. So this is what I get told a lot. I get told that your job is to serve papers in bailiff court and that you don't need that many people and you this and you that, but yet when the people come to our office, this is what we get. Well, we called the sheriff's office and they said they would work on it, but we haven't seen anybody. Is that necessarily the sheriff's fault? No, because the sheriff has to man the jail, the sheriff has to man the courthouse, and he has to answer for 911 calls that come through dispatch. So the thing is it wouldn't matter if they gave the sheriff 50 more patrol deputies. There's still never going to be enough because they have so many other job duties. Whereas to me, we have the ability to be able to kind of break off and do those small assignments. So to answer your question, I have to have a commissioner's court that's willing to give me the money.
So, there's some problems in the commissioner court.
Well, and I will say this, they have given me an extra deputy in the last 4 years. They finally gave me one, but it's a very slow process. Again, the constable is way down here and very low. And so it's, I'll give you another prime example. One thing that I do that most law enforcement don't do in this county, I do a lot of animal cruelty investigations. Day before yesterday, I went to a house and seized over 20 exotic birds and snakes that were not being fed.
Whoa.
I am not Steve Irwin, but somebody has to do it. And so animal control called the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office said, look, we'd love to do it. We've got a lot of stuff going on right now. Can you give us a few days? It was kind of one of those things where the animals really needed to be taken then. So I went and I did the seizure warrant. I did all the paperwork and I worked with animal control to get them out of there. So there's a lot of duties that I do as a constable that really isn't my job, but I have to do it because that's what my citizens want. And I'm going to do what my citizens want because that's why I ran for office.
Under what conditions would 911 dispatch you on your deputy?
So we have a computer system called Spillman. So when we're in a patrol car, every call that comes into the county comes on Spillman. And Spillman is a big map of the county. So you can see where every officer is on that map because we have GPS in our cars. So let's say a 911 call comes in for a domestic disturbance in Winona. So when that call pops up on the screen, if my guys are the closest ones to it, that's who dispatch is going to send. Same thing for the sheriff's office. If their guys are the closest one to it, that's who dispatch is going to send. Because the ultimate goal is to get somebody there. It doesn't matter who it is, except for firemen. But we'll go and we'll do that. Yes, sir.
I've heard the constable's the only law enforcement group that can arrest the governor.
That's not entirely true. You know, there's an old saying. I remember when I first became a constable, there was a guy that was in our constable school, and he told us we were the only elected official that could arrest the sheriff. Any peace officer in the state of Texas can arrest an elected official if they are breaking the law. So I'm not trying to bring up anything bad, but we have 2 constables in our county that have been arrested in the last 6 months for doing things that they shouldn't have been doing. They were arrested by the Texas Rangers, and they're elected officials as well. Everybody is subject to the law. Just because you're elected doesn't mean that you're above the law, and it doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want to do. So the game wardens work for the state. So the game warden is like a DPS trooper. They are a state law enforcement official, and their primary job duties fall under the Parks and Wildlife Code, enforcing wildlife and fisheries, boater safety, but they're still a peace officer just like I am. Every peace officer in the state of Texas, if he had an alligator in his car, if I wanted to go look the law up, I could arrest him for that. Now, I don't know anything about it because I've never been to the Game Warden Academy, but I can enforce that law. The only law that they cannot enforce is civil law, and that's because they're not a constable. Yes, sir.
City of Dallas had marshals. How about that?
So a marshal is a city employee. That is the Dallas City Marshal's office. We have a Tyler City Marshal's office. Their primary duty is to be a bailiff for the city court and to enforce city traffic warrants. So when you see a Dallas City Marshal, 99% of what they're doing is they're out hunting people who didn't pay their traffic ticket.
There you go, Paul.
Good.
Are your deputies civil service? You run for election, but are they professional staff?
Well, they all have to be peace officers, just like me. There is no civil service test that they have to take. Just like the sheriff, just like the constable, we can hire anybody we want to hire, but depending on the job, like if I have a secretary or a civilian employee, she doesn't have to be a peace officer. But if I hire a deputy, someone who's going to enforce the law, you have to be T. Cole certified. Yes, sir.
And can a new constable fire everybody?
If the new constable comes in, he can clean house and move on. So take me, for instance, when I ran for office, I grew up in Chapel Hill my whole life. I never saw a constable in Chapel Hill my entire time living there, ever. Because our constable, they worked 8 to 5, they made sure the coffee pot stayed warm, and that was it. And so when I ran for office, I was meeting people that had worked in that precinct for 10 or 15 years that I had never seen before. So when I told them that I expected them to patrol, be seen, be available for the public, they said, we're not about that. I said, well, then you got to go.
See you. Bye, Felicia.
Great. We'll present you with this. This is a certificate for your office.
Thank you, sir.
We will donate a book to the Literacy Council in here. Appreciate everything.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your service.
Hey, Bill Cruz, do you remember this guy named Joe Molino back in Dallas? He was the Dallas City Marshal.
Yep.
Well, I was watching the news one night, it was Thanksgiving, and Joe Molino and his guys, they all got up real early, had breakfast together, did some paperwork, and then they went out and arrested about 30 people that had not paid their tickets on Thanksgiving Day. Thanksgiving Day.
Everybody's home.
Yeah. And they interviewed him, Channel 4 News interviewed him, and he said, well, what kind of message did this send? He said, well, I don't know about sending any message, but then again, Christmas is coming. My kind of guy. All right, JB, how much we got to till this week?
Come on, I'm feeling lucky.
$600, and there's 35, you got 1 out of 35 chances.
Okay, take it over there, Josh. Josh, we're gonna get you to draw a
Come
number.
on, Josh, I'm feeling lucky.
Are we giving away a big screen TV?
I guess you buy it with $2,600. 414.
414.
You got it.
Go get him, Andrew.
Yeah, you can't agree. Woo!
I'm looking for the ace.
Ace of diamonds. All right, what do you got? Not even close.
Darn.
So we'll make another run at it next week.
Yeah, no, we're doing it now. Yes, sir.
Everybody good?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, let's all stand for the 4-way test, things we think, say, or do as Rotarians. First.
Is it the truth?
Second.
Is it fair to all concerned? Third. Will it build goodwill and
Better friendships.
Fourth.
Will it be beneficial to all?